Okay, so this is going to be a lengthy video. You know, um, I think it's worth it. And I'm not going to do the whole 3 hour thing. You see what I'm looking at right here? You know, it's funny because this was sent to me by first, and it's something that I already knew about. So I'm listening to it and I'm like, I already know this, I already know this, I already know this, I'm aware of this. And then it dawned on me that I already seen this. And I look in, and sure enough, I have seen part one, two, and three, 3 hours worth, and I'd already had it liked and everything. Okay, and I got looking, and oh shit, this has been like 2.5 years ago. But see, I've done so much research over the years that just like with Agenda 21, I had to go back and brush myself up because it's been like 8 years ago that I went in depth for studying that, and that's huge, okay? And you still got to go back and brush up on stuff because it's just there's so much, okay? But I'm going to play this one, so if you have the attention span of a flea and you can't go more than 2 or 3 minutes, you don't belong listening to this, so get on out of here, okay? Because if your attention span's that short, there ain't nothing we can do for you. And I hate to be that way, but that's just the reality of things. But before we get into this, I'm going to show you a couple things here. Okay? The United Nations. Okay, but before we go to the United Nations, let's go here. Okay? Let's see, where do I want to start this from? Okay. Okay, modern Freemasonry. Okay. And the point much later date of 1717. Now, when you get into the Freemasons and you start learning the symbolism, you know, the symbols, the things they flash in their face, and you understand, okay, the Grand Lodge of England, okay, right here. What would be known as the Grand Lodge of England? But in many ways, Freemasons, as we know it today, as the Scottish and Harris tweeted, okay, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, the point is the Freemasons have been around for a very long time. Okay, and the Freemason Lodge, you know, Freemasons, the lower level Freemasons know nothing about the upper echelon of Freemasons, and they do good things for society. The upper echelons of Freemasons don't do good things for society. They do the exact opposite. Very evil, very wicked. Okay? So we'll start there, then we'll jump over here because it only makes sense. The history of the United Nations. You're going to wonder, why am I showing you this stuff? What does that have to do with that? I want you to pay attention. January 1942, the name United Nations is coined. Okay, in 1942, we bring in the UN. Okay, and right behind the UN, what do we bring in 1946? Okay, this is all during World War II. This is all leading up to, well, what I'm going to be playing and breaking down for you just in part one. I don't need to go any further because it's all in your face and I've already, oh my God, I've worked on this. I've said this stuff so many times over the years. But some people may not know it because I've lost a few channels. I've lost like one hell of a lot of videos. Because when they take my videos down, they're gone, man. And at the beginning, when I had my first channel, hell, I had probably 1,500 videos on that channel. And I didn't have none of it backed up. I'm telling you, I didn't. And I lost it all, man. Okay, so. But it didn't stop me. I just come back and start all over again, you know. How the bad penny keeps returning. Okay, so you see the Freemasons, okay, beginning in 1946. You say, why am I showing you the Freemasons? Why am I showing you Mensa? Well, because, see, the Freemasons is a recruiting ground for the elite. Mensa, the world's most smartest people, okay, is a recruiting ground for the elite. You better understand that. This is where the elite look to recruit people they're going to use as pawns to bring in their agendas, okay? That's the reason I'm showing you this. And then, of course, last but not least, okay, the feminist, okay, movement, second wave came in 1960. So within a 20-year period, 42, that's right, 46, 60, you follow this? Within a 20-year period, we have three major things that's been brought in. Okay, see, because they do all of their stuff and baby stuff, but they bring this stuff in for a reason. So now we'll go back over here, and I'm going to play this, and I'm going to break this down as it goes, because that's probably the best way to do this, okay? This is a taped interview by Richard Day, okay, New World Order Barbarians. And I'm only going to play tape 1. You can pull this stuff up on YouTube. You can listen to it in its entirety. Okay? There's lots of stuff that people should be doing to wake up to what's really going on around them. And that's no lie, but I can't make people do anything, man. I know that I've done a lot of research over the years, and I know I'm very aware of what's going on around me. And I also understand how they destroyed the dating scene. And it's all been through social engineering. I don't like what I'm seeing. Men and women shouldn't be doing on each other as we're doing on each other. But anyhow, that was just, let's go forward with this.
3 tapes on the New Order of Barbarians.
Yes, there is. Part 1, 2, and 3. There's 3 tapes on this, okay? And you're talking about sitting and listening, if you want to listen to all 3 of them, 3 hours. No lie, you can be here for 3 hours if you want to listen to all 3. But I would have to say that most of you won't do that because most of you have a very low attention span. You won't even be able to make it through the video I'm doing now, which is probably going to be over an hour long. So let's go.
Referred to on these tapes as simply the New World System. Tapes 1 and 2 are reminiscence by Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan of a speech given on March 20th, 1969 by an insider of the order, whose names and credentials are given in the interview with Dr. Dunnigan on tape 3. The moderator for these tapes is Randy Engel, National Director, U.S. Coalition for Life.
There has been much written and much said by some people who have looked at all the changes that have occurred in American society in the past 20 years or so, and who have looked then retrospectively to earlier history of the United States and indeed of the world, and come to the conclusion that there is a conspiracy of sorts which influences, indeed controls, major historical events not only in the United States but around the world. This conspiratorial interpretation of history is based on people making observations from the outside, gathering evidence, and coming to the conclusion that from the outside they see a conspiracy. Their evidence and conclusion are based on evidence gathered in retrospect, period. I want to now describe what I heard from the speaker in 1969, which in several weeks will now be 20 years ago. The speaker did not speak in terms of retrospect, but rather predicting changes that would be brought about in the future. The speaker was not looking from the outside in, thinking that he saw conspiracy. Rather, he was on the inside, admitting that indeed there was an organized power, force, group of men who wielded enough influence to determine major events involving countries around the world. And he predicted, or rather expounded on changes that were planned for the remainder of this century. As you listen, if you can recall the situation, at least in the United States in 1969 and the few years thereafter.
See, this is my era. This is when I was growing up. Okay, and a life compass. I was born in 60, the year 1960, but at the end of that year. Okay. See, the numbers behind my name on my original channel was 122460, pushed together. 12/24/60, my birthday. Most people from a long time couldn't figure out I put my birthday right in their face. Okay, I literally did. Okay, but he's correct. Okay, what he's talking about is already materialized right in your face. No lie. Listen up, because you're going to recognize a lot of this, including the dating scene, ain't you?
And then recall the kinds of changes which have occurred between then and now, almost 20 years later. I believe you'll be impressed with the degree to which the things that were planned to be brought about have already been accomplished. Some of the things that were discussed were not intended to be accomplished yet by 1988, but are intended to be accomplished before the end of this century. There is a timetable, and it was during this session that some of the elements of the timetable were brought out. Anyone who recalls early in the days of the Kennedy presidency, the Kennedy campaign, when he spoke of progress in the decade of the 60s, that was kind of a cliche in those days, the decade of the 60s. Well, by 1969, our speaker was talking about the decade of the 70s, the decade of the 80s, and the decade of the 90s. So that I think that terminology, that way of looking at things and expressing things, probably all comes from the same source. Prior to that time, I don't remember anybody saying the decade of the 40s and the decade of the 50s. So I think this overall plan and timetable had taken important shape with more predictability to those who control it sometime in the late 50s. That's speculation on my part. In any event, the speaker said that his purpose was to tell us about changes which would be brought about in the next 30 years or so that an entirely new worldwide system would be in operation before the turn of the century. As he put it, we plan to enter the 21st century with a running start. He said, as we listened to what he was about to present, he said, some of you will think I'm talking about communism. Well, what I'm talking about is much bigger than communism. At that time, he indicated there is much more cooperation between East and West than most people realize. In his introductory remarks, he commented that he was free to speak at this time. He would not have been able to say what he was about to say even a few years earlier, but he was free to speak at this time because now, and I'm quoting here, Everything is in place and nobody can stop us now. That's the end of that quotation. He went on to say that most people don't understand how governments operate, and even people in high positions in governments, including our own, don't really understand how and where decisions are made. He went on to say that the people who really influence decisions are names that, for the most part, would be familiar to most of us, but he would not use individuals' names or names of any specific organizations. But that if he did, most of the people would be names that were recognized by most of his audience. He went on to say that they were not primarily people in public office, but people of prominence who were primarily known in their private occupations or private positions. The speaker was a doctor of medicine, a former professor at a large Eastern university, and he was addressing a group of doctors of medicine, about 80 in number. His name would not be widely recognized by anybody likely to hear this, and so there's no point in giving his name. The only purpose in recording this is that it may give a perspective to those who hear it regarding the changes which have already been accomplished in the past 20 years or so, and a bit of a preview to what at least some people are planning for the remainder of this century.
Now think about it. He just told you about the changes that have already occurred in the last 20 years or so. And what did I show you at the beginning of this video? And look at the year he was doing this, that Dr. Richard Day gave this speech. And he's talking about in the last 20 years or so, changes that had already been made. Yeah. United Nations, a spot for all puppets to come together to understand and know puppets, governments, that's right. To understand and know what's going on, the best way to control would be through the United Nations. Okay? Freemasonry, Freemasons is a big part of this, okay? Mensa, you don't think it is, but see, Freemasons have a secret society at the top of the round table. No lie. Mensa has secrets at the top of the round table. See any similarities? Yeah. And even today, you hear them talking about at the round table. Okay? I mean, they shove it in your face. Trump Towers is loaded with Freemason symbols. Okay, loaded with it on the outside of the building, on the inside of the building, and Trump's actual floor he lived in on Trump Towers was loaded with it. You can bet Trump's new home in Florida is also loaded with it. Okay, we'll go on.
So that we, or they, would enter the 21st century with a flying start. Some of us may not enter that century. His purpose in telling our group about these changes that were to be brought about was to make it easier for us to adapt to these changes. Indeed, as he quite accurately said, they would be changes that would be very surprising and in some ways difficult for people to accept. And he hoped that we, as sort of his friends, would make the adaptation more easily if we knew somewhat beforehand what to expect. Somewhere in the introductory remarks, he insisted that nobody have a tape recorder and that nobody take notes, which for a professor was a very remarkable kind of thing to expect from an audience. Something in his remarks suggested that there could be negative repercussions against him if his if it became widely known what he was about to say to our group, if it became widely known that indeed he had spilled the beans, so to speak, when I first heard that, I thought maybe that was sort of an ego trip, somebody enhancing his own importance. But as the revelations unfolded, I began to understand why he might have had some concern about not having it widely known what was said, although this was a fairly public forum where he was speaking. Remarks were delivered, but nonetheless he asked that no notes be taken, no tape recorder be used, suggesting there might be some personal danger to himself if these revelations were widely publicized. Again, as the remarks began to unfold and some of the rather outrageous things that were said at that time, they certainly seemed outrageous, I made it a point to try to remember as much of what he said as I could, and during the subsequent weeks and months and years to connect my recollections to simple events around me, both to aid my memory for the future in case I wanted to do what I'm doing now, record this, and also to try to maintain a perspective on what would be developing if indeed it followed the predicted pattern, which it has. At this point, so that I don't forget to include it later, I'll just include some statements that were made from time to time throughout the presentation, just having a general bearing on the whole presentation. One of the statements was having to do with change. People get used, the statement was, people will have to get used to the idea of change. So used to change that they'll be expecting change. Nothing will be permanent. This often came out in the context of a society of where people seem to have no roots or moorings, but would be passively willing to accept change simply because that was all they had ever known. This was sort of in contrast to generations of people up until this time, where certain things you expect to be and remain in place as reference points for your life. So change was to be brought about, change was to be anticipated and expected and accepted, no questions asked. Another comment that was made from time to time during the presentation was, people are too trusting. People don't ask the right questions. Sometimes being too trusting was equated with being too dumb. But sometimes when he would say that and say people don't ask the right questions, it was almost with a sense of regret, as if he were uneasy with what he was a part of and wished that people would challenge it and maybe not be so trusting. Another comment that was repeated from time to time, this particularly in relation to changing laws and customs and specific changes. He said everything has two purposes. One is the ostensible purpose, which will make it acceptable to people. And second is the real purpose, which would further the goals of establishing the new system and having it. Frequently he would say, there's no other way. There's just no other way. This seemed to come as sort of an apology, particularly when at the conclusion of describing some particularly offensive changes, for example, the promotion of drug addiction, which we'll get into shortly. He was very active with population control groups, the population control movement, and population control was really the entry point.
Now pay attention to the words, because this is why TFL is here. Population control. NWO is like an apple or a pear that has a core. And the core of NWO has always been and always will be the dating arena, population control. To control the population, you must control the birth rate because we want population reduction, not me. But this is what they're really talking about here. So pay attention close to his words, population control, Georgia Guidestones. Pay attention and understand why I showed you what I showed you at the beginning.
Into specifics following the introduction. He said the population is growing too fast. Numbers of people living at any one time on the planet must be limited, or we will run out of space to live.
Which is a lie. You could take the entire world's population right now and fit them all into the United States and still have tons of room left over. No lie. Think I'm kidding you? No, I'm not. You could take the entire world's population right now, including China, and fit them into the United States and still have lots of room left over. We are not overpopulated. The United States has thousands and thousands of miles of land that it isn't even lived on. Okay? I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just fact. Okay, I don't know how many of you people have actually traveled in your life, but I've done one heck of a lot of traveling around the United States in my life, and I can tell you right now, okay, this is all complete hogwash. But it's, remember, he's only telling you what's being said. Okay, now he's talking about, oh, we're getting too many people alive. Yeah, that's what they're talking about. And we're going to fill up the planet. Complete lies. See, people don't take into consideration the amount of people that are born and the amount of people that die every single day globally. They don't take into consideration the amount of people that just died compared to what was born. Nobody ever thinks about that. See, they don't use common sense.
We will outgrow our food supply, and we will overpollute the world with our waste.
Now, I'm going to stop it again, and I hate to do that, but I have to. We're going to outdo the world's food supply. We're going to run short. So that's why years ago, for you young people, I know you don't listen to people like Willie Nelson, the country singer. Okay, you may not even care about Willie Nelson, the country singer. But maybe you should take a little trip back a few years back, and you should understand that Willie Nelson was fighting for the farmers' rights. Monsanto's and the farmers. Government entity called Monsanto's and the farmers. So you don't understand. Let me tell you, this is fact, and you can go look it up because I'm not going to do your work for you. I've already done this. In your face around the United States, between the government-run Monsanto's taking over the seed and remodifying the seed. This is why you find things now that grow that don't produce seed. See, for years, farmers would let a percentage of their crop grow to waste to collect the seeds from that to plant their crop for next year. Well, Monsanto's, well, I'm sorry. You got to have their seeds. You can't let your crop grow to seed and collect the seed and grow your own field. No, like the game of Monopoly. They own the seeds. They control the production of food and the food that's growing. And they're told what they can grow each year, and they're told what they cannot grow, and what they can only bring to market, okay, and how much. The government literally paid farmers their yearly income off their crop to not grow food. No lie, actually happened in this country. They shut farms down that wouldn't be noticed by the public. They left the farms alive that were off of any kind of major interstate or freeway so that people on highways and interstates would see the farms growing crop. This way is undercover, under wrap. You're not noticing all the farms that are no longer growing. And then you're not noticing that these farms that you are seeing are all growing the same things. Yeah, see, this is all stuff people don't realize. Man-manufactured food shortages, deliberately created.
People won't be allowed to have babies just because they want to or because they are careless. Most families would be limited to 2. Some people would be allowed only 1, and the outstanding person or persons might be selected and allowed to have 3. But most people would allow to have only 2 babies. That's because the zero population growth is 2.1 children per completed family, so something like every 10th family might be allowed the privilege of the 3rd baby. To me, up to this point, the word population control primarily connoted limiting the number of babies to be born, but this remark about what people would be allowed and then what followed made it quite clear that when you hear population control, that means more than just controlling births. It means control of every endeavor of the entire world population. A much broader meaning to that term than I had ever attached to it before hearing this.
It is. It's about every endeavor of your life. It was about, through the feminist movement, taking the women from the home and putting them in the workplace so that they could collect the taxes off the women who at that point, the majority, not all women, there were women working then because you had women school teachers. During wartime, you had women going and working in the armories, manufacturing the weapons that was being used in the war while the men were over there giving up their lives. Yeah, see, all of this is right under your nose, isn't it? And then, of course, the division. Oh, that was a big one. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. Okay? And with the genders. It's a complete split of the genders. What are we seeing? Come on, wake up. Where do you think TFL come from?
As you listen and reflect back on some of the things you hear, you will begin to recognize how one aspect dovetails with other aspects in terms of controlling human endeavors. Well, from population control, a natural next step then was sex. He said sex must be separated from reproduction. Sex is too pleasurable and the urges are too strong to expect people to give it up. Chemicals in food and in the water supply to reduce the sex drive are not practical. The strategy then would be not to diminish sex activity, but to increase sex activity, but in such a way that people won't be having babies. And the first consideration then here was contraception. Contraception would be very strongly encouraged, and it would be connected so closely in people's minds with sex that they would automatically think contraception when they were thinking or preparing for sex.
That didn't quite work out too well for him, but he's correct. This is what was talked about back during 1968. Since that time, they have used drugs through Big Pharma. They've used drugs in the water. They've used chemtrails in the skies above your head. Okay? They've used division amongst the genders. And they've over-sexualized society. Over-sexualized society. They have flipped everything upside down on its head. Everything. No lie. Everything is upside down on its head. This is such a long, deep topic that is so hard to get it out to people. Okay, and then with the censorship, okay, and taking things down and shutting people up that's telling the truth because they don't want the people hearing the truth.
And contraceptives would be made universally available. Nobody wanting contraception would be find that they were unavailable. Contraceptives would be displayed much more prominently in drugstores and right up with the cigarettes and the chewing gum out in the open rather than hidden under the counter where people would have to ask for them and maybe be embarrassed. This kind of openness was a way of suggesting that contraceptives are just as much a part of life as any other item sold in the store. And contraceptives would be advertised. And contraceptives would be dispensed in the schools in association with sex education. The sex education was to get kids interested early, making the connection between sex and the need for contraception early in their lives, even before they became very active.
Yes, making kids aware of sex early. UNESCO, UNESCO of United Nations, UNESCO. Any of you know who UNESCO is? They're the ones that were putting out the sex ed for children in the schools. Matter of fact, if you want to be real, this is as real as it gets. UNESCO has plans, and they put out paperwork to the schools for sex ed of children starting at 5 years old to teach children how to masturbate. No lie. Fact. Okay? Over-sexualized society, including the children.
At this point, I was recalling some of my teachers, particularly in high school, and found it totally unbelievable to think of them agreeing to, much less participating in distributing contraceptives to students.
But the schools did.
That only reflected my lack of understanding of how they...
But the schools did. I remember high schools having condoms in the office, and all you had to do was go in the office and ask for a condom, and they would give it to you. Yeah, no lie.
These people operate. That was before the school-based clinic programs got started. Many cities in the United States by this time have already set up school-based clinics, which are primarily contraception, birth control, population control clinics. The idea then is that the connection between sex and contraception introduced and reinforced in school would carry over into marriage. Indeed, if young people, when they matured, decided to get married, marriage itself would be diminished in importance. He indicated some recognition that most people probably would want to be married, but that this certainly would not be any longer considered to be necessary for sexual activity. No surprise then that the next item was abortion, and this now back in 1969, 4 years before Roe v. Wade. He said abortion will no longer be a crime. Abortion would be accepted as normal and would be paid for by taxes for people who could not pay for their own abortions. Contraceptives would be made available by tax money so that nobody would have to do without contraceptives. If school sex programs would lead to more pregnancies in children, that was really seen as no problem. Parents who think they are opposed to abortion on moral or religious grounds will change their minds when it is their own child who is pregnant. So this will help overcome opposition to abortion. Before long, only a few diehards will still refuse to see abortion as acceptable, and they won't matter anymore. Homosexuality also was to be encouraged. People will be given permission to be homosexuals. That's the way it was stated. They won't have to hide it. And elderly people will be encouraged to continue to have active sex lives into their very old ages as long as they can. Everyone will be given permission to have sex, to enjoy however they want. Anything goes. This is the way it was put. And I remember thinking how arrogant for this individual or whoever he represents to feel that they can give or withhold permission for people to do things. But that was the terminology that was used. In this regard, clothing was mentioned. Clothing styles would be made more stimulating and provocative. Recall back in 1969 was the time of the miniskirt, when those miniskirts were very, very high and very revealing. He said it's not just the amount of skin that is exposed that makes clothing sexually seductive, but other more subtle things are often more suggestive. Things like movement and the cut of clothing and the kind of fabric, the positioning of accessories on the clothing. If a woman has an attractive body, why should she not show it, was one of the statements. There's was not detail on what was meant by provocative clothing, but since that time, if you watch the changes in clothing styles, blue jeans are cut in a way that they're much more tight-fitting through the crotch. They form wrinkles. Wrinkles essentially are arrows, lines which direct one's vision to certain anatomic areas. And this was around the time of the burn your bra activity. He indicated that a lot of women should not go without a bra. They need a bra to be attractive. So instead of banning bras and burning them, bras would come back, but they would be thinner and softer, allowing more natural movement. It was not specifically stated, but certainly a very thin bra is much more revealing of the nipple and what else is underneath than the heavier bras that were in style up to that time. Technology. Earlier he said sex and reproduction would be separated. You would have sex without reproduction, and then technology was reproduction without sex. This would be done in the laboratory. Indicated already much research was underway about making babies in the laboratory. There was some elaboration on that, but I don't remember the details. How much of that technology has come to my attention since that time, I don't remember. I don't remember in a way that I can distinguish what was said from what I subsequently have just learned as general medical information. Families. Families would be limited in size. We already alluded to not being allowed more than 2 children. Divorce would be made easier and more prevalent. Most people who marry will marry more than once. More people will not marry. Unmarried people would stay in hotels and even live together. That would be very common. Nobody would even ask questions about it. It would be widely accepted as...
And it has been.
No different from married people being together. More women will work outside the home. More men will be transferred to other cities in their jobs. More men would travel into work. Therefore, it would be harder for families to stay together. This would tend to make the marriage relationship less stable, and therefore tend to make people less willing to have babies. And the extended family would be smaller and more remote.
And break up the family, which is exactly what's happened. See, everything he's saying is right on point. It's already occurred.
Travel would be easier, less expensive for a while, so that people who did have to travel would feel that they could get back to their families, not that they were abruptly being made remote from their families. But one of the net effects of easier divorce laws, combined with the promotion of travel and transferring families from one city to another, was to create instability in the families. If both husband and wife are working and one partner gets transferred, the other one may not be easily transferred. So one either gives up his or her job and stays behind while the other leaves, or else gives up the job and risks not finding employment in the new location. Rather diabolical approach to this whole thing. Euthanasia. Everybody has a right to live only so long. The old are no longer useful. They become a burden. You should be ready to accept death. Most people are. An arbitrary age limit could be established. After all, you have a right to only so many steak dinners, so many orgasms, and so many good pleasures in life. And after you've had enough of them, and you're no longer productive in working and contributing, then you should be ready to step aside for the next generation. Some things that would help people realize that they had lived long enough. He mentioned several of these. I don't remember them all. Here are a few. The use of very pale printing ink on forms that people necessary to fill out, so that older people wouldn't be able to read the pale ink as easily and would need to go to younger people for help. Automobile traffic patterns. There would be more high-speed traffic lanes, traffic patterns that older people with their slower reflexes would have trouble dealing with, and thus tend to lose some of their independence. Big item which was elaborated at some length was the cost of medical care would be made burdensomely high. Medical care would be connected very closely with one's work, but also would be made very, very high in cost, so that it would simply be unavailable to people beyond a certain time. And unless they had a remarkably rich supporting family, they would just have to do without care. And the idea was that if everybody sees enough what a burden it is on the young to try to maintain the old people, then the young would become agreeable to helping mom and dad along the way, provided that this was done humanely and with dignity. And then the example was there could be like a nice farewell party, a real celebration. Mom and dad had done a good job. And then after the party's over, take the demise pill. The next topic is medicine. There would be profound changes in the practice of medicine. Overall, medicine would be much more tightly controlled. The observation was made, Congress is not going to go along with national health insurance that in 1969 he said is now abundantly evident, but it's not necessary. There are other ways to control health care. These will come about more gradually, but all health care delivery would come under tight control. Medical care would be closely connected to work. If you don't work or can't work, you won't have access to medical care. The days of hospitals giving away free care would gradually wind down until that was virtually non-existent.
Which is now already happening in your face. The medical system is not here for you. Your medical system has been being controlled from neons now forever. And everything it's telling you is correct. This is the reason during the first round of the invisible bug, nursing homes that were in lockdown and people couldn't visit, and elderly that were dying, okay? Ventilators killing people. That's right. Not saving lives, but killing people. That's what the ventilators was about. It was never about saving lives. It was the exact opposite.
Costs would be forced up so that people won't be able to afford to go without insurance. People pay. You pay for it, you're entitled to it. It was only subsequently that I began to realize the extent to which you would not be paying for it. Your medical care would be paid for by others, and therefore you would gratefully accept on bended knee what was offered to you as a privilege. Your role being responsible for your own care would be diminished. As an aside here, this is not something that was developed at that time. I didn't understand at the time. But as an aside, the way this works, everybody's made dependent on insurance. And if you don't have insurance and you pay directly, the cost of your care is enormous. The insurance company, however, paying for your care does not pay that same amount. if you are charged, say, $600 for the use of an operating room, the insurance company does not pay $600 on your part. They pay $300 or $400. And that differential in billing has the desired effect. It enables the insurance company to pay for that which you could never pay for. They get a discount that's unavailable to you. When you see your bill, you're grateful that the insurance company can do that, and in this way you are dependent and virtually required to have insurance. The whole billing is fraudulent. Anyhow, continuing on now, access to hospitals would be tightly controlled. Identification will be needed to get into the building. Security in and around hospitals would be established and gradually increased so that nobody without identification could get in or move around inside the building. Theft of hospital equipment, things like typewriters and microscopes and so forth, would be allowed and exaggerated. Reports of it would be exaggerated, so that this would be the excuse needed to establish the need for strict security until people got used to it. And anybody moving about in a hospital would be required to wear an identification badge with a photograph and telling why he was there, employee or lab technician or visitor or whatever. And this is to be brought in gradually, getting everybody used to the idea of identifying themselves until it was just accepted. This need for ID to move about would start in small ways, hospitals, some businesses, but gradually expand to include everybody in all places.
And if you pay attention, he's correct. Not just the badge that people wearing in hospitals and clinics, but workplaces, that's correct. Workplaces have gone more and more to people wearing identification or clocking in through a card they're carrying. But he's right. This has been playing out right in everybody's face.
It was observed that hospitals can be used to confine people for the treatment of criminals. This did not mean necessarily medical treatment. At that time, I did not know the word psycho prison, as in the Soviet Union, but without trying to recall all the details, basically it was describing the use of hospitals both for treating the sick and for confinement of criminals for reasons other than the medical well-being of the criminal. Definition of criminal was not given. The image of the doctor would change. No longer would he be seen as an individual professional in service to individual patients, but the doctor would be gradually recognized as a highly skilled technician, and his job would change. The job is to include things like executions by lethal injection. The image of the doctor as being a powerful, independent person would have to be changed. And he went on to say, doctors that make entirely too much money, they should advertise like any other product. Lawyers would be advertising too. Keep in mind, this was an audience of doctors being addressed by a doctor, and it was interesting that he would make some rather insulting statements to his audience without fear of antagonizing us. The solo practitioner would become a thing of the past. A few diehards might try to hold out, but most doctors would be employed by an institution of one kind or another. Group practice would be encouraged, corporations would be encouraged, and then once the corporate image of medical care, as this gradually became more and more acceptable, doctors would more and more become employees rather than independent contractors. And along with that, of course, unstated but necessary, is the employee serves his employer, not his patient. So that's, and we've already seen quite a lot of that in the last 20 years, and apparently more on the horizon. The term HMO was not used at that time, but as you look at HMOs, you see this is way that medical care is being taken over since the national health insurance approach did not get through the Congress. A few diehard doctors may try to make a go of it remaining in solo practice, remaining independent, which parenthetically is me, but they would suffer great loss of income. They'd be able to scrape by maybe, but never really live comfortably as those who were willing to become employees of the system. Ultimately, there would be no room at all for the solo practitioner after the system is entrenched. Next heading to talk about is health and disease. He said there would be new diseases to appear, which had not ever been seen before, would be very difficult to diagnose and be untreatable, at least for a long time. No elaboration was made on this, but I remember not long after hearing this presentation, when I had a puzzling diagnosis to make, I would be wondering, is this what he was talking about? Is this a case of what he was talking about? Some years later, as AIDS ultimately developed, I think AIDS was at least one example of what he was talking about. I now think that AIDS probably is a manufactured disease. Cancer. He said we can cure almost every cancer right now. Information is on file in the Rockefeller Institute if it's ever decided that it should be released. But consider, if people stop dying of cancer, how rapidly we would become overpopulated. You may as well die of cancer as something else. Efforts at cancer treatment would be geared more toward comfort than toward cure. There was some statement that ultimately the cancer cures which were being hidden in the Rockefeller Institute would come to light because independent researchers might bring them out despite these efforts to suppress them. But at least for the time being, letting people die of cancer was a good thing to do because it would slow down the problem of overpopulation. Another very interesting thing was heart attacks. He said, there is now a way to simulate a real heart attack. It can be used as a means of assassination. Only a very skilled pathologist who knew exactly what to look for at an autopsy could distinguish this from the real thing. I thought that was a very surprising and shocking thing to hear from this particular man at that particular time.
And I will give an update on that, okay? They've had the technology for a long time to bring on a heart attack on people. And they use frequency to do it because our bodies are electrical. We all are electrical, okay? And they use frequencies to do this. And this is something people need to understand. Michael Jackson didn't just have a heart attack from a doctor that was at his home. Michael Jackson was assassinated. Why was he assassinated? Because he knew a lot. Because you could never be in Michael Jackson's position of fame without have already sold your soul to this evil entity that's running us. You think your actors in Hollywood, you think your super big singers that become famous worldwide just did that? No. They were allowed to do that. They were aired to do that because they had already, well, basically sold their soul to evil. But a lot of these people in these positions, like Michael Jackson, didn't understand or realize how real what they'd gotten themselves into was. And when they started seeing through the corruption, they would say things, or they would put a lyric in their music, or they would say something in an interview that would get them in trouble with the elite. And this is what happened to Michael Jackson. So then they destroyed him in the public's eyes in America, okay, and painted him out to be a pedophile. Michael Jackson left the country, moved overseas, got the hell out of it, I don't blame him, and planned on doing a tour overseas and all new songs, and was going to expose the agenda of these psychopaths. And then Michael Jackson was assassinated through a heart attack.
This and Business of the Cancer Cure really still stand out sharply in my memory because they were so shocking and at that time seemed to me out of character. He then went on to talk about nutrition and exercise, sort of in the same framework. People would have to eat right and exercise right to live as long as before. Most won't. This in the connection of nutrition, there was no specific statement that I can recall as to particular nutrients that would be either inadequate or in excess. In retrospect, I tend to think he meant high salt diets and high fat diets would predispose toward high blood pressure and premature arteriosclerotic heart disease, and that if people were too dumb or too lazy to exercise as they should, then their circulating fats would go up and predispose to disease. And he said something about diet information about proper diet would be widely available, but most people, particularly stupid people who had no right to continue living anyway, they would ignore the advice and just go on and eat what was convenient and tasted good. There were some other unpleasant things said about food. I just can't recall what they were, but I do remember of having reflections about wanting to plant a garden in the backyard to get around whatever these contaminated foods would be. I regret I don't remember the details, the rest of this about nutrition and hazardous nutrition.
Back in his day, he stood a chance. Back in '68, he still stood a chance. You could get real food seed. You could grow a crop, or you could grow a big garden, a little garden, and you could get fruits and vegetables that were good, that actually had the seeds in them, that actually would grow to seed if you wanted to let it grow to seed and collect it the following year. And it had the vitamins and minerals in it that your body, your health, your immune system needs. Well, that's all been done away with. It's all now GMO. Monsanto's, they gave them a monopoly, owning all seed, making sure that they genetically modified the seed so that it won't produce seed and that it won't be any good for your health. So you got processed food, you have GMO, and you got big pharma. Yeah.
With regard to exercise, he went on to say that more people would be exercising more, especially running, because everybody can run. You don't need any special equipment or place. You can run wherever you are. As he put it, people will be running all over the place. And in this vein, he pointed out how supply produces demand, and this was in reference to athletic clothing and equipment, as this would be
supply and demand. Oh my God, supply and demand. There you are. See, monetary. All things that, unless it's food or water or shelter, are things you need to survive. Okay, and to say that we're running out of resources, like let's use oil for example. They like to tell you oil is a fossil fuel, like it came from the dinosaurs. No, that lie came from the Rothschild dynasty of the Rockefeller. I do believe it was the Rothschild. It came from your bankers. It was a complete lie. Oil was a petroleum. Oil is naturally produced by the earth. And if we don't pump oil, oil will pop the surfaces in certain areas and you'll have little oil lakes. You really will. When the earth produces too much and it's got nowhere else to go with it. Because the earth naturally produces it. See, there's a never-ending supply of petroleum oil, not fossil fuels. A never-ending supply. See, we're not overpopulated, we're not running out of food, we're not running out of resources. The earth naturally produces the resources for us humans, okay? Your CO2 isn't causing global warming. Grass, flowers, trees, plants, they all breathe in CO2. Yeah, they're alive. Grass is alive, a life form. Tree is a life form. A flower is a life form. So you don't pay attention around you. And all of these things that we take for granted when you're cutting your grass, and when you're growing your crops, and when you're going in the forest full of trees, that they're all live entities breathing in your CO2 and exhaling oxygen. Do you know anybody that needs oxygen? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, you shouldn't even have to go any further to understand. Climate change is a complete hoax. It's a lie. This is how they're bringing in their agendas, by lying to you, by creating the problem they're telling you we're having. Willie Nelson fought for the farmers' rights against Monsanto's. Farmers fought against Monsanto's. Monsanto's is elite control. This is the reason it didn't matter who fought against it, it still happened. That's exactly what this guy's telling you. Okay, George Carlin, a comedian, told you the truth and you all laughed. It was a joke. The manosphere completely divided. Men and women completely divided. The family units broke down and destroyed. Over-sexualizing society, so this is what people now think love is. And everything's upside down on its head. They think everything's based on usury, men and women alike, when it's not. See, I've given you real sound advice over the years in the dating arena. I mean, a sound advice, absolutely 100% truth, but you don't want to hear it. The majority of you, no, it's not that way now. We can't go back to that because it's not that way. We have progressed. No, you haven't. You've been led. You've been steered. You're doing exactly what the elite wants you to do. You can't even bring the manosphere together. No lie. It doesn't matter. You all got the same problems. You give yourself different names for your little cult club. That's right. And you can have your own little club over here, and we'll have a club over here, and we'll use our clubs to club each other over the head. While the elite's laughing at us, because they ain't got to worry about it. It's fight and conquer. You're never going to rise up and say no to them, are you? That's what it comes down to.
Made more widely available and glamorized, particularly as regards running shoes. This would stimulate people to develop an interest in running, and as part of a whole sort of public propaganda campaign, people would be encouraged then to buy the attractive sports equipment and to get into exercise. Again, well, in connection with nutrition, he also mentioned that public eating places would rapidly increase. That this had a connection with the family too. As more and more people ate out, eating at home would become less important. People would be less dependent on their kitchens at home. And then this also connected to convenience foods being made widely available. Things like you could pop into the microwave. Whole meals would be available prefixed. And of course we've now seen this in some pretty good ones. But this whole different approach to eating out and to previously prepared meals being eaten in the home was predicted at the time to be brought about. Convenience foods. And the convenience foods, though, would be part of the hazard. Anybody who was lazy enough to want the convenience foods rather than fixing his own also better be energetic enough to exercise, because if he was too lazy to exercise and too lazy to fix his own food, then he didn't deserve to live very long. This was all presented as sort of a moral judgment about people and what they should do with their energies. People who are smart, who would learn about nutrition, and who are disciplined enough to eat right and exercise right are better people and are the kind you want to live longer. Somewhere along in here there was also something about accelerating the onset of puberty, and this was said in connection with health, and later in connection with education, and connected to accelerating the process of evolutionary change. There was a statement that we think we can push evolution faster and in the direction we want it to go. I remember this only as a general statement. I don't recall if any details were given beyond that. Another area of discussion was religion. This is an avowed atheist speaking. And he said, religion is not necessarily bad. A lot of people seem to need religion with its mysteries and rituals, so they will have religion. But the major religions of today have to be changed because they are not compatible with the changes to come. The old religions will have to go, especially Christianity. Once the Roman Catholic Church is brought down, the rest of Christianity will follow easily. Then a new religion can be accepted for use all over the world. It will incorporate something from all of the old ones to make
one world religion. People, one world religion. He's telling you the truth. He really is.
Make it more easy for people to accept it and feel at home in it. Most people won't be too concerned with religion. They will realize that they don't need it. In order to do this, the Bible will be changed. It will be rewritten to fit the new religion. Gradually. Key words.
What did I tell people so many times? That your Quran, your Bible, have all been wrote by these very same people, by your elite. I'm not saying we don't have a God or a creator, okay? I'm not saying that at all, so don't take me wrong. I'm telling you it's been used to control you. It's been used as a means of control. Okay, but now they want, and it's also been used for division, of course. This is why we've had people fighting each other over their belief off of something the elite gave you, okay? And fighting each other, and then you had 10 commandments, and one of them is thou shalt not kill. And there you are killing each other in God's name over the belief of something that was given to you. This is why you're in a world right now full of deception, lies, and evil. And evil is ruling, right? And your Bible, the good book, that's right. It's supposed to be the good book, the good side, not evil. Okay, is allowed in an evil world in every motel room. Come on. You people just don't use any common sense. You just want to believe and disregard anything that's put in your face. I'm not telling you not to have a belief in a creator. Okay, whatsoever, because I know there is life after death and I know it to be factual. Okay, I'm serious as a heart attack. I already know that there's life after death and I know it to be factual. Okay, I don't believe, I'm not saying we don't have a creator. I even believe we do have a creator. But what I'm telling you is what's been put in our face and what we've been reading in allegory. That's matching up and lining up to today's society. That's because they gave you the written plan and allegory and put it in the form that you would believe this is what your creator said. Knowing full well that they're the one that gave it to you. All of us have been lied to our entire lives. See, so this is why I've said the stuff I've said over the years to you. And it's not because I'm trying to be an ass to anybody. Not at all. And I'm not telling you not to believe what you want to believe. I'm only bringing awareness to you of something that is actually truth and not a lie. And if you don't want to hear the truth because the truth offends you, then when bad things happen to you, it's because you turned your back to what was being said.
Will be replaced with new words having various shades of meaning. Then the meaning attached to the new word can be close to the old word, and as time goes on, other shades of meaning of that word can be emphasized, and then gradually that word replaced with another word. I don't know if I'm making that clear, but the idea is that everything in Scripture need not be rewritten, just key words replaced by other words, and the variability in meaning attached to any word can be used as a tool to change the entire meaning of Scripture and therefore make it acceptable to this new religion. Most people won't know the difference, and this is another one of the times where he said the few who do notice the difference won't be enough to matter. Then followed one of the most surprising statements of the whole presentation. He said, some of you probably think the churches won't stand for this. And he went on to say, the churches will help us. There is no elaboration on this. It was unclear just what he had in mind when he said the churches will help us. In retrospect, I think some of us now can understand what he might have meant at that time. I recall then only of thinking, no, they won't, and remembering our Lord's words where he said to Peter, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So, yes, some people in the churches might help, and in the subsequent 20 years we've seen how some people in churches have helped. But we also know that our Lord's words will stand, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Another area of discussion was education, and one of the things in connection with education that I remember connecting with what he said about religion was, in addition to changing the Bible, he said that classics in literature would be changed. I seem to recall Mark Twain's writings was given as one example. But he said the casual reader reading a revised version of a classic would never even suspect there was any change, and somebody would have to go through word by word to even recognize that any change was made in these classics. The changes would be so subtle, but the changes would be such as to promote the acceptability of the new system. As regards education, he indicated that kids would spend more time in schools, but in many schools they wouldn't learn anything. They'll learn some things, but not as much as formerly. Better schools in better areas with
Charlotte Isabey. Okay. I don't know how many of you people heard of Charlotte Isabey. She was in the Ronald Reagan administration, and she was the head of the school systems in America. And she wrote a book called The Dumbing Down of America. She got criticized. She got slammed by politicians. And then about 5-6 years later, these politicians came back and paid her a visit and apologized personally to her for their ridicule of what she said, because they found out everything she said was truth. Truth. And then I get to witness kids graduating high school coming into my last job I was on, and at the end of a shift you had to do up a worksheet, and you had to know simple math of adding big numbers together and coming up with totals. And these kids that graduated high school couldn't do it without their smartphone calculator or calculator. They couldn't take a pen and a piece of paper, scrap sheet, or the back of their worksheet and do their math. The simple added. The dumbing down of America. The dumbing down of the globe. Because it's not just here in America. It's to change people's perceptions. Okay? Now I'm going to let this finish playing out, and then I've got quite a few things I'm going to say, so this is probably going to end up being a 2-hour video, okay? That's why I said for the people with low attention span, don't waste your time, get on out of here, okay? For the people who are dead serious and finding out the real truth, stick around, because a lot of you people that already know this are going to know what I'm saying is true. And maybe some of you will pick up on something you didn't know before. You know, maybe you will even know more than I do, and you can add that in the comments section. That would be awesome. See, I'm not against learning more. I'm always learning and learning and learning, but I'm going to let it play out now, and then I'm going to talk.
Better people. Their kids will learn more. In the better schools, learning would be accelerated. And this was another time where he said, we think we can push evolution. By pushing kids to learn more, he seemed to be suggesting that their brains would evolve and that their offspring then would evolve, sort of pushing evolution in where kids would learn and be more intelligent at a younger age, as if this pushing would alter their physiology. Overall, schooling would be prolonged. This meant prolonged throughout the school year. I'm not sure what he said about a long school day. I do remember he said that school was planned to go all summer, that the summer school vacation would become a thing of the past, not only for schools but for other reasons. People would begin to think of vacation times year-round, not just in the summer. For most people, it would take longer to complete their education. To get what originally had been in a bachelor's program would now require advanced degrees and more schooling. So that a lot of school time would be just wasted time. Good schools would become more competitive. I inferred when he said that he was including all schools, elementary up through college, but I don't recall whether he said that. Students would have to decide at a younger age what they would want to study and get onto their track early if they would qualify. It would be harder to change to another field of study once you got started. Studies would be concentrated in much greater depth, but narrowed. You wouldn't have access to material in other fields outside your own area of study without approval. This seemed to be more where he talked about limited access to other fields. I seem to recall that as being more at the college level, high school and college level perhaps. People would be very specialized in their own area of expertise, but they won't be able to get a broad education and won't be able to understand what is going on overall. He was already talking about computers in education, and at that time he said anybody who wanted computer access or access to books that were not directly related to their field of study would have to have a very good reason for so doing, otherwise access would be denied. Another angle was that the schools would become more important in people's overall life. Kids, in addition to their academics, would have to get into school activities unless they wanted to feel completely out of it. But spontaneous activities among kids, the thing that came to my mind when I heard this was sandlot football and sandlot baseball teams that we worked up as kids growing up. I said to kids wanting any activities outside of school would be almost forced to get them through the school. There would be few opportunities outside. Now the pressures of the accelerated academic program and accelerated demands where kids would feel they had to be part of something, one or another athletic club or some school activity. These pressures he recognized would cause some students to burn out. He said the smartest ones will learn how to cope with the pressures and to survive. There will be some help available to students in handling stress, but the unfit won't be able to make it. They will then move on to other things. In this connection, and later on in the connection with drug abuse and alcohol abuse, he indicated that psychiatric services to help would be increased dramatically. In all the pushing for achievement, it was recognized that many people would need help, and the people worth keeping around would be able to accept and benefit from that help and still be super achievers. Those who could not would fall by the wayside and therefore were sort of dispensable, expendable, I guess is the word I want. Education would be lifelong. Adults would be going to school. There'll always be new information that adults must have to keep up. When you can't keep up anymore, you're too old. This is another way of letting older people know that the time had come for them to move on and take the demise bill. If you got too tired to keep up with your education, you got too old to learn new information, then this was a signal you begin to prepare to get ready to step aside. In addition to revising the classics, which I alluded to a while ago with revising the Bible, he said some books would just disappear from libraries. This was in the vein that some books contain information or contain ideas that should not be kept around, and therefore those books would disappear. I don't remember exactly if he said how this was to be accomplished, but I seem to recall carrying away the idea that this would include thefts, that certain people would be designated to go to certain libraries and pick up certain books and just get rid of them. Not necessarily as a matter of policy, just simply steal it. Further down the line, not everybody will be allowed to own books, and some books nobody will be allowed to own. Another area of discussion was laws that would be changed. At that time, a lot of states had blue laws about Sunday sales and certain Sunday activities. They said the blue laws would all be repealed. Gambling laws would be repealed or relaxed so that gambling would be increased. Indicated then that governments would get into gambling. We've had a lot of state lotteries pop up around the country since then. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to end this video right now. Okay. We're almost at the end of it anyhow. Part 1. I see there's a part 4 here on my side. And like I said, I've done so much to this, and I knew about this, and I'd already seen the series about 2.5 years ago of this particular interview. I've done so much, and I've lost so much with my channels that's been taken down that a lot of you don't see it now. And there's not much I can do about that, and I'm not even going to try to start over. I mean, you know, I've backed a lot up, but man, it's a lot of work trying to create a channel and put everything back up again. If I'm taken down again, of course, you know, I'll be back because I won't just go away. But it's a lot of work, okay? And when I lose my work due to censorship, that's just the way it is, man. You know, you can blame yourself for going along with it for the tool. I can understand people want the tool, need the tool to live, called money. Okay, but you need to understand that we, as people, we need to take control of what's going on and take these people that are doing this to out. And we need to recreate a money system. You can do it right under their damn nose, and everybody just start accepting your new system and walking away from theirs. And I know the bankers don't like hearing this type of talk, but this is exactly what needs to happen. Because when you abuse what you have for your own selfish gain, you have no right having it. Especially when it affects every single human being on the face of this planet. And when you people that are working for Google, you people that are working for your corporations, Apple, you know, GE. I mean, the list, I could go on and on with the list, I mean, for miles, okay? But I'm not going to. Not here anyhow. And now. But I'm going to tell you this. Addressing first, okay? You know, this guy did apologize to me on an open live stream. Okay, so I accept that apology because it's what we have to be able to do as human beings. We have to be able to connect. We have to stop judging people we do not know. Okay, we really do, man. You cannot tell me you know me from my videos, and I cannot tell you I know you from your videos or your appearances on live streams or my appearances on live streams. or your actors in Hollywood that played in the movies, in your face, and in your sitcoms. We do not know each other on a personal level. We know nothing about each other. Do you understand that? And when you hate on somebody you don't even know, it's very hypocritical, okay? It's exactly what the elite one is doing. So with that, yes, I'm talking about first again, but I'm going to do that because I'm going to clear the airway to the real truth, okay, when it comes to this type of stuff. And I'm going to be blunt in your face right now to everybody, okay, with what I'm going to say. This is not directed at the man I'm talking about right now, and I'm not doing it to slam this man in any way at all. So let's get this clear. I'm not slamming first, and I'm not going to, okay? It ain't going to happen, okay? He come on my show. He was respectful to me. He talked to me pleasant, okay? And I thank him for that. That's serious, okay? And he means well in what he was saying at the time on that show, okay? I know he did. And I'm not going to ever slam him for that, but I am going to say this, okay? The stuff that's been going on, and knowing that the manosphere has been infiltrated and YouTube is loaded with employees of the establishment. I like to use that as the new term because it sounds a whole lot better than agent or shill. Yeah, it really does. Because in reality, they're employees of the establishment, as in Hollywood, military industrial complex, Google, United Nations. Yeah. But the entities that are doing this to us are planning people. And remember at the beginning, I showed you Mensa. And I showed you the years these things came in. And remember I talked about, just briefly, the Freemasons. Both of these entities have secrets at the top and round tables. Both of these entities are recruiting grounds for people they're using. Then they pay them money. And if you're in the military, that's already a recruiting ground. If you're in law enforcement, that's already a recruiting ground. Yeah. Oh, you don't believe it? Yeah. You know, that's all law enforcement is the thuggery to enforce the elite's wants. That's what police are here for. They're like a street gang, okay? And they don't even know they are. Military pawns for political gain. That's all they are. They're pawns for political gain, which is the elite, for the elite's gain, which are mostly corporations and bankers. Rothschilds, see, Rockefellers. Oh, God, I got so criticized for bringing that up, didn't I, for so long. Anyhow. And so back to first for a moment here. See, things that happened that led me to believe in my gut, I always go with my gut. When my gut screams something at me my whole life, I had this thing about knowing something I shouldn't know about, and then it happening. No lie. Close your eyes, go to sleep, and watch TV set in your head. Just playing like a video as you close your eyes, and you're not even asleep. You just close your eyes, okay? And you're watching this little video, and then 2-3 days later, what you've seen in that video happens in real life. See, I've had this about me my whole life, and I don't know where it comes from. I just know it happens, okay? That's all I can tell you. And I'll tell you this. When it comes to Mr. Hoka, you know, some of you people that are working for the establishment have been told about Hoka or me, or both, most likely both, in the manosphere. Because TFL, yeah. When I came on, we already had the pickup artist industry and men's rights activists. This is what the only thing that was online. There was no such thing as MGTOW. Okay? Involuntary celibacy was here, but we didn't have an incel community at all. You had involuntary celibacy, and that was it, a definition. Since I come on and gave you people TFL, True Forced Loneliness, okay, and adding that to MRA, which was being controlled at the time by Paul Elam, who is an employee of the establishment. Okay, we have had lots of employees of the establishment come on board, and the manosphere is surrounded with them. Okay, and now when it comes to Mr. Hoka and the Huffington Post and the article that was posted brand new out of Texas on the Incel Rebellion, okay, that listed 10 years of domestic terrorist acts by incels. I want you to go back and think about what's really going on here. Well, pay attention. You're being set up. And the setup is to bust a good speaker, somebody they pick, and make it known publicly, mainstream media, big time, to scare the living crap out of the rest of us that are speaking out in the manosphere to shut us up. Now, why would they do something like that? Well, because population control. Control. It's all about control. Every last bit of this is. It's about controlling us. We're all slaves to these psychopaths. And you don't have to be a slave to these psychopaths. You just have to see through what's going on. You have to understand if you're in a position at Google, if you're in a position in the United Nations, if you're in a position with this entity that we're talking about, and you don't realize that you are, but you know you are because of who you're working for, maybe law enforcement, right? You know, when you're in these positions, law enforcement, military, and I feel really sorry for military except for the higher command. The lower tier military, I feel sorry for because they take these kids right out of high school that have no life experience, that have been lied to their whole life, and they put them right in here, and they're obliviously and unaware of what's really going on whatsoever, and they're used as pawns. This is why I'm against military. That and the fact of our ability to grow up. See, with First and Steve, my protection towards my friend Steve, you didn't know Steve and I know each other a little better than you people ever thought. Okay? You people that hate on me or hate on Steve or hate on both of us don't know us. Okay? You don't know that me and Steve actually know each other. We know, we talk personal shit behind the scenes. You don't even know him. Okay? You don't know Steve. And that's just as plain as it is that you don't know me. Nor do I know First. But I know what I witnessed, okay? And I know what I've seen, and I know that Monday, Forever Lone Monday, was working for the establishment. I know Annika was working for the establishment, okay? And First, being on Monday's live streams, yeah, this is something that happened as well, okay? And I don't care, I know First told me trolls, and I know all about trolls. I've been doing this a long time, okay? And I understand there's trolls that'll mimic your accounts, and I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. And he could be 100% telling the truth, okay? And then again, on the other hand, he could be 100% bullshitting me. How do I know? I can't honestly say that I know because, see, what happened from the beginning shapes what I feel now, and it's going to be up to First to show that he is not, okay, working with the establishment. And even if First is working with the establishment because he does live outside of Silicon Valley, okay? And I only know this because of a phone number, yeah. But of course I didn't call him. Why would I? Okay? But I had the phone number, okay? And I know this because I Googled it and found a location area off that number. And when I did that, I knew that he was outside of Silicon Valley. Now, does that mean he's working for the establishment? Of course it don't. But does it mean he could be? Of course it does. See, you see the dilemma here? Okay? And the porn being put in Steve's live streams at the end. All 3 times First was present. The last time it was only First and Steve. We looked at what was flashed up in the cam, and that was probably deliberately done to send us down a rabbit hole and laugh at us. Okay, I'm used to that kind of crap to see that happens with people that are not aware that the only thing they're doing is going along with the very people that are going to destroy them. You may be making a lot of money and think you're on top of the world, but when it all comes to push and shove, you better ask yourself this question: are you one of the elite? Because if you're not one of the psychopaths that need to be stopped, you're a pawn. When it's said and done, you will be in the same spot that I am and that everybody else is. Oh, yeah. And most of you won't even be there because you'll be killed. Because they won't want you telling the people that they have control over. And if they get their chip to work the way they want with AI, you won't have to worry about any of that, man. You become robots. You'll be being controlled. You won't even have a right to your own thought. See, this affects every last one of us. Who has the right to control somebody else's every thought and movement of their whole life from the time they're born like they're a robot? I'll tell you who has that right. Nobody. See, so when you're accepting the tool, the money, for a nice, fancy, rich lifestyle, and you do anything for that because, after all, what are we doing? We're all competing against each other, are we not? Yeah. We're doing exactly what these tapes are telling you. There's 4 of them here, but, most people out here, you won't even get through part 1, let alone 2, 3, or 4, or 5, 6, 7, 8. No. You won't take the time out of your busy schedule to acknowledge yourself. And I know it's hard, especially when everything you've ever learned came from a television set or a book or a magazine, and mainstream media stuff that's been lying to you your whole life, including your school system is controlled. He talked about books here. Books that are going to be illegal for you to possess. You know why? Because knowledge is power. Knowledge has been withheld from people for many, 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 many years now. From all of us. So first, I look out for Steve Hoka. The porn was put in the live streams. You were there all 3 times. First, you was on Monday's live streams. Monday's an employee of the establishment. First, whether you're an employee of the establishment or not, I'm not going to attack you. I'm only going to tell you this. It doesn't matter, even being an employee of the establishment, if you are. You yourself will be knocked back to my level. You yourself will be knocked back to Steve's level, to everybody else's level. You will be above nobody. Because this is what happens once they get their wants. Because the elite don't care about you. They don't care about any of you workers. They give you plenty of the tool for you to do what you're doing, to get their agendas in place. And then they expose them, get away with it, do away with it. You're nobody. They're done with you now. Think of it like in the dating arena. When you're done using each other, what do you do to each other? You throw each other away. So put it in that light, okay? I'm not going to say anything other than I know these things. And whether first you've done this or you didn't do this doesn't really matter to me. The point is for you to understand it doesn't matter how much money you or your family have. If you're not if you're not part of the psychopaths that our society needs to attack and take out, then you're a pawn. And you better remember that, just like the military. You're being used. You got to think of it this way. When they get their wants, every last person on this planet are going to be affected by it. All of you people turning your head, all of you people that don't even know what's coming, all of you people that know what's coming, you know none of us want it. You know that you all would like to have one good woman in your life and have the majority, one good woman in your life, and you would like to have children, and you'd like to grow old with that person, that one mate, that best friend of the opposite gender. You know this as well as I do. And you know what they've done to us already, and this is why so many men can't have. This is why so many women and men will be alone, because it's to do away with relationships for population control. And because they're telling you we're overpopulated when we're not, because they engineered the shortage of food, they engineered the GMO foods to make you sick for the health system. They've had the cure for cancer. They know what causes cancer, so do I. Cancer's real name was scurvy. Back in the pirate days, if people got scurvy, they ate plenty of fruits and vegetables, and the scurvy went away. Guess what? Scurvy is cancer. They renamed it and pulled the blanket over your eyes again. They can cure cancer, always been able to cure cancer, and never will. It's being used to line these medical establishments' pockets and kill you for population reduction. Coat and kill to get the number where they want it. Then control the amount of births. But this is why the dating scene is the core of NWO. And for the truthers over there on the other side, which I've been part of, that don't want to talk about the dating scene, don't want to acknowledge it, don't want to think it has anything to do with NWO, it's because you're still not awake. You fooled yourself into believing you're awake. Unbelievable. The patheticness of all of this. Okay, so, here we are approaching 2 hours. That's why I said it'll probably be 2 hours long at least. But I guess my thing to you guys is this. When it comes to what happened with Steve's live streams, when it comes to Steve being put in the Huffington Post under the Run Me Over in Canada and linked to that incel thing, when it comes to the attack on the incels and 10 years attacks by incels on public, and an actor called Elliot Rogers, who daddy was a director of Hunger Games, who I can show you video of Elliot Rogers right up on stage in Hollywood with his dad, the bigwigs of Hollywood. The psyops that they've been pulling on us, the lies they've been pulling on us, and using incel as domestic terrorism. And a Patriot Act, whether we have a revolution or not in this country, they moved in on the manosphere, and that's exactly what they're going to do, is pick a great speaker, and this is why I was looking out for Steve. Because TFL, the manosphere, TFL, True Force Loneliness, from the day I brought it up, I told people then, we do not promote violence. We don't condone violence. I've been wanting to bring the manosphere together for a long time. I've been wanting to get the manosphere to start looking at the root cause instead of the symptoms, so they could understand where this comes from, why it's happening. You need to know who your enemy is, and your enemy isn't each other. You have to stop competing against one another, man. And I'm looking out for Steve because Steve's my friend. The porn that was put into his stuff on the last live stream had to come through the back door. It's the only way it could have gotten there, would be through the back door. When I blocked first from my channel and his name was removed from the block list, that came through the back door. It doesn't matter if he tells me throw or not, that it wasn't him and it was a throw. I said he could be telling the truth and it wasn't him, but he could be lying and it could still be him. We don't know each other, man. And even if he is working for the establishment, the one that done it, it don't mean I'm going to be your enemy unless you can't see what I'm talking about. Because you need to step out of what you're doing. You can't continue it. It's going to destroy your life when it's all said and done, too. So meanwhile, you help the enemy destroy their lives, and then they destroyed your life. This is what's really going to happen to so many people that are working for the establishment. They're going to be taken out, killed, and the ones that ain't will be kicked back to the level of everybody they abused. Because you're being used. We have to stop allowing this entity to use us. We have to take back control. We have to come back together. So if First wants to be a friend, I'll be his friend. But that means he has to take time to get to know me. And I have to get to know him. Not online, not in a live stream. We have to get to know each other for real, like Steve and I know each other. So you understand that first, I'm not your enemy. You don't have to be my enemy. I don't want you as my enemy. And I don't want any of this fighting, man. I want us together. And you have a right to your opinion. I'm not taking that away from you. I have a right to mine. We have a right to agree to disagree. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Without insulting each other, man, we don't have to hate on each other. We don't even know each other, man. It's retarded that we're doing this because in the reality of things, if we don't look out for each other and we can't stand together, then the people that are doing this to us are going to win. And there ain't nobody that I can think of on this planet that wants what they want. They're psychopaths. They have to be stopped. And there's more of us worldwide than there is them. They're only just a little handful compared to the amount of people alive on this planet that they want to do this to. And we have to stop them, and we're not going to ever stop them if you can't see what I'm telling you. That's what this has always been about to me, and I've done so much research, and I understand this so finely, you know. And it turns out, it's been about 2.5 years ago, I actually watched this series. Okay, so I was like, wow, I know this already. Yeah, I know this already. Yeah, I know this. And then it dawned on me. And I went and looked, and sure as enough, I had actually thumbed up and favored her, and they were already on my list. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, I remember this really well. So first gave me what I had already seen a couple of about 2.5 years or so ago. He wouldn't know. It's not his fault. But it tells me that he's awake a lot more than what people think he is. You're damn right he is, man, or he wouldn't be, you know. He showed that on the show. So somebody said, you know, he don't want to talk about NWO. Okay, I understand that, but we have to talk about NWO. when it comes to the dating arena, because we have to show people where it comes from. They have to understand who the real enemy is. They have to understand that we have to stop competing against each other. We are not in a game, a sport, an arena. We have to cut that childish behavior out. Because if we keep competing against each other, you're doing exactly what the elite wants you to do. You'll never stand together to go after your real enemy. You're going to keep attacking people who have nothing to do with it, just as big a victim as you are. And that's really where this comes from. So, first, on a personal note, I hope you're not offended by anything I've said here, because this is not to offend you. It's just called being honest. And I was looking out for Steve because my gut says, there's no way that was an accident with the Huffington Post. No way. Steve was targeted. And Monday definitely is an employee of the establishment. And your behaviors at the time and being located where you're at and watching how intelligent you are, because you're not dumb. By no means, okay? I can tell you that the red flags are up, okay? What can I do? And I watch these red flags always, okay, always. And even if you are, it's not about hating on one another. It's about you understanding who you're really working with and what you're really doing, and not wanting to anticipate on destroying billions of people's lives on the line, on not falling for the line, believing that we're overpopulated, believing these things that they want you to believe to keep us divided. Just like with the black people. See, I sarcastically agreed with you about segregating everybody, but I don't agree with that. No, not at all. In reality of things, I would never do that. Because until we can accept each other as human beings and grow the hell up and leave each other alone and live our lives and not discriminate based on race, gender, see, that's part of growing up. That's part of recognizing each other as human beings in a vessel. And when you die, you're not dead. I tell you that right now because I know that to be a fact. Okay, but just the same, understand that much. I don't agree with the segregation. I sarcastically went along with it on the show, and I did it in a sarcastic manner because I wanted to see what other people's opinions was on it, because then I can weigh how divided we still are. And what I heard on the show was division. I fought against division for years. Why would I go along with it? Of course I don't. Of course I don't. We have to start looking at each other as human beings, man. We can't be looking at each other's damn skin color and differences. That's like looking at women's differences and can't figure out why you can't get along. You're too busy focusing on each other's differences that you can't recognize each other as human beings. If you're going to segregate, this is what's going to happen. You got the blacks over here, the whites over here, the Asians over here, and now we got another reason to keep cold-cocking each other and hitting each other with a club because they're not part of that club. And the fighting and the bickering and the division goes on. Can't have that. No. Can't have that. We got to stop that childish behavior. That's back to selfishness again. It's back to stepping on somebody else because you believe in you're better. No, you're not better. You're human. Your body's going to die just like the rest of us going to die, and you're going to go to the other side just like the rest of us are. And meanwhile, one group of people are always going to have the power over the top of everybody else? No. We got to stop that behavior. But I'm right at 2 hours now. I would encourage people to go watch this and all of them for part 4 on the Order of Truth. Okay. Okay, right here, you see it in the video. Order of Truth, just type that into a YouTube search bar, pull it up, go to this channel, give it a sub, and watch them. Watch them, for real. And I'm open to doing a live stream with First if he would like. Okay, that's totally up to him. But I'm definitely open to doing that. And with that being said, I'm going to get on out of here. And First, don't take anything I said personally, because I'm not your enemy. I don't want you as my enemy. I don't care if you're an employee of the establishment or not. It's going to be up to you to show me who you are, and that's going to mean, do you want to get to know each other or don't you? Okay? I'm not against that. I'm not against that at all, because we have to understand this. If we don't learn how to get along with each other and work together for the same goal for everybody, then the people that are doing this to us have won. End of story.